Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
If you've listened to this podcast, you know from time to time I have brought up this story. Certainly when I get out there and I talk to groups about the science of networking, the science of business relationships, which is really just the science of relationships, I tell the story of Margaret Mead. Now, Margaret Mead was a famous anthropologist. She passed away in 78, so she's been gone for some time. But there's the story out there that I heard about and I looked up. She was teaching a class, and one of the students asked the question, what was the first sign of human civilization? And her answer, people thought all sorts of different things, fire, weapon, whatever, but her answer was surprising in that it was a healed femur. And she went on to explain that, in the animal world, when an animal breaks its femur, most animals have a femur, the bone that connects the knee to the hip. When that bone breaks, it's a death sentence. The animal will die, can't protect itself, can't forage, can't anything. But when they came across the remains, when she came across the remains, her teams of healed femurs in humans, they realized there was something different. There was something empathetic about this species where they would be willing to stay behind. And when I work with groups or when I get out and speak, I'll do a little demonstration, groups of 4, and one group that's empathetic in that way and the other that's not. And I point out that the non-empathetic group dies. It just does. And if you are alive today and you're listening to this, you are alive today. You have that DNA in you. You have that empathy within you. Sometimes it gets buried. Sometimes it gets lost with respect to greed, whatever. But it's there. And I think that generosity is the ultimate superpower with respect to relationships. And so today I have on with me Sherian Koshy. Sherian is the USA Today bestselling author of Neurogiving and is the global authority on the neuroscience of generosity. He draws on decades in philanthropy, and he explains how understanding the brain helps organizations inspire giving, deepen trust, and build donor relationships that last. Sherian, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
How'd you get interested in this? I mean, you didn't meet with your guidance counselor and say, hey, I want to.
I did not, no. So I spent a lot of time working in nonprofit organizations. And as you know, in organizations that work, when there's a retail organization or a service-based organization or something like that, there's an exchange of value. So if you're connecting with someone and there's a trusted relationship, you are getting something from the other person. But in a nonprofit organization, when someone gives you money, you're not getting anything in return. So there's a high degree of trust delta that's occurring. And so I was very fascinated in how this played out, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And ultimately, I got really down into the weeds around why did this work? And that got me into neuroscience and behavioral science. And as I studied that more, I got really interested in how all of this research played out. And that ultimately led to the book and talks I give and keynotes and whatnot. And so that's all part of my life's work.
Yeah, no, I think it's, to me, it's fascinating. When I first got into what I'll call networking or building networking groups and helping people network, to me, it was all very mechanical at first, very strategic, very, and then I started to, people would say certain things, have a good handshake. It's like, well, why do you think that works? There's, I just a natural curiosity. My father was a professor, so there's a lot of science being batted around at home. And I started to look into it. And when I heard that Margaret Mead story, which you heard on the front end, to me, that was kind of like, okay, there's the explanation. I could see how it happened.
Yep.
And you talk about, generosity is hardwired. It's, but we get caught up in this hard selling.
And so what's interesting about what you just said is that for us, we tend to work on the tactical parts without understanding the why behind the how.
Yeah.
And people will say things like, direct eye contact and the firm handshake, and you do the things without understanding why that's true. And the science behind it describes the biological reasons why people trust other people.
Yeah.
And so direct eye contact or the firm handshake are all proxies for how we biologically understand trust, which is truly a brain component of the brain's elements that are working to help our brain understand, is this someone who is going to kill me, or is this someone who's going to partner with me?
Right.
So the idea of a firm handshake, for example, or direct eye contact signals to someone's brain that they are not a threat. And when we do that repeatedly, our brains are essentially cognitive misers. Our brains are, which is just to say that it's essentially like a cell phone with a battery that's at 1%. It's always trying to optimize what it's doing. And so if you're at a cocktail party, for example, your brain is scanning the room, trying to figure out who's a danger to me and who's an opportunity to me.
Yeah.
And all of these like weird little tips that we have about how to navigate the room are ways in which our brain's trying to figure out what are the ways in which, like in olden days, we would have figured out who's someone that will help me go hunt or forage or whatever. And in this case, it's someone who will like be a business partner.
Right.
And that's exactly what our brain's doing is figuring out what's the modern day equivalent of that. And, eye contact is the way that we essentially navigate that component and say like, oh, if I connect with someone via their eyes, certainly consistently, right? Like that's just one component. But there's actually a very interesting study. There's a weird tangent. There's a weird study that it's out of Israel that when we shake someone's hand, people will say that they don't do this, but if you put a video in the room, they actually take their hands after they shake someone's hand. They take their hand and they put it up to their nose because our sense of smell determines how much we engage with another person. And so we normally think of sense of smell as something that we think about like in romantic relationships, but it crosses all kinds of barriers. So it's not just like the firm handshake, it's also how humans smell one another that determines how we engage with one another. I know that's a weird tangent, but I found that super fascinating.
Well, this podcast is built on the back of weird tangents. I showed you before we hit record. This is episode 902, and early on when I started doing a podcast, it's like, okay, if I just continue on the trite, this is networking, blah 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 blah. I'm 30 episodes and I'm done, and there's just so much more to it. We've known that humans have had relationships since the beginning of time. That's
Absolutely.
What's helped us survive, right? And there are a lot of animals out there that are like that. We have been very successful with respect to it, so we know it's been there. And a lot of for years, I would talk about the Alta Valley Gorge, which is in Tanzania, where the river is cut through, and they can look back at layers and layers of humanity, and that's kind of the common theme. Is they're working together, they're cooking, they're doing whatever. What I love about the neuroscience end of it, it explains the why.
Yeah.
Why did this happen? Well, there weren't colleges and universities that were saying, hey, you need to do this. It was just people were falling into these patterns because that optimized their ability to be successful. And they probably couldn't even speak at the time. They just knew that these things were happening. Now, when you give keynotes, get out and work with people, is this a difficult thing to sell to somebody? I mean, I know people who are dismissive of it. Don't tell me about the pain, just show me the baby, kind of a thing.
I think for most people, they get it. They understand. They've been working in the how part of the execution for a very long time. So the revelatory part is when they start to pull back the curtain and they suddenly see the why part. And the science is super clear on the why part. There's lots of academic studies that
Yeah.
unpack why we do the things that we do, why other people react. And when we understand, like, trust is not this squishy, like, random thing that happens, that it's actually biological, that there are, fMRI studies that we can, like, look at brain chemicals that happen when we interact with someone, and why we trust another person, why we decide to partner with another person. All of these things start to explain, oh, that's why I should do that thing. And if I do that thing repeatedly, it will result in them trusting me, or them, this will result in customer loyalty or customer retention.
Right.
All of these elements start to create the aha moment of, okay, that makes sense now. And it retrains, whether it's a company or an individual, to say, let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's think about this from a principle perspective and then derive the practice. And what I like to say is, now you're not just singing karaoke, you can essentially play jazz, because you're not just taking the notes and putting them out there. You actually understand how to play the music.
Yeah, no, I am with you. I don't study this like you do, but I am a fan of the science of relationships. And the podcast I recorded on Monday, it's called the Dartmouth scar experiment, where they put a scar on people's faces and then and set them in interviews, but then they took the scar off just before they went in, and people thought they had this scar on their face, and just how it changed, their perception of how people perceive them.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of it, and so I study it from that standpoint. I don't study it like you do necessarily, but what I find is, as much as I am into it and I study these sorts of things, I am subject to them. Right? Just because I know the magic trick doesn't mean that I'm immune to the magic. And I will find that when I have conversations with people, I notice the little moments where it's switching from, okay, this person's a stranger, to, you know what, I'm comfortable and I want to help this person.
Yes.
And, I'm not hooked up to, MRIs or anything like that, or, whatever, the brain stuff, whatever the acronyms are. But I can feel the chemicals in my body, right? I can feel that warm flush of, okay, and it's very real. It's a neat thing, right? It's like, okay, I've kind of crossed this bridge, and it works in reverse too, where there's somebody who I think I trust, and all of a sudden something happens, and it's like, okay, now I'm really questioning this.
Yes.
I really got to question this.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the key in all kinds of networking components, right? So some people feel like and I see this all the time, whether it's on social media or in books or something like that, where they'll exaggerate how you can create networks quickly, or these sort of, like, develop a network instantaneously or something like that. And the reality is that in all circumstances, and people know this intuitively, that in all circumstances, networks that are sustainable, that are designed to build something that lasts, are created over time. And the science bears this out. You can't use a grand gesture to elicit a trusting relationship. It's something that's demonstrated over a long period of time. It's consistency that derives trust. So you don't walk up to a prospective romantic partner and say, like, let's get married, let's live the rest of our lives together, with some big grand gesture. You meet with them very regularly for a long period of time, theoretically, and you get to know one another. The same thing is true in business. The same thing is true in friendship. And so, we all have people in our lives that if they called us today and said, "Hey, will you do X?" We don't need any more explanation. We will do that, whether it's give them money or jump on a plane and go there and do whatever. Like, we don't need any other context. But if I were to call you and say, "Hey, give me money," or jump on a plane or whatever, you probably wouldn't do that for me because
Yeah.
we've just met.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And so when we bypass that consistency component, people understand that, and it doesn't matter how soon or how big of a gesture that is. It's not the quality of the pitch. That's the piece that people miss. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, if I have something very persuasive to you, you'll suddenly part with, your hard-earned money to buy this product from me." That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So, and the science and the biology is really, really clear on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. As much, and we're really kind of in the infancy of really understanding these things, right? This is probably all within the last 30 years, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Really, the early days of behavioral economics and all these sorts of, we're really starting to discover these things. I find it interesting. I graduated college in '84, and a lot of these studies, a lot of these things were not, they weren't, right. It was just,
Yeah.
but we know a lot now, and yet I still get LinkedIn requests or LinkedIn comments from people, or not comments, but people reaching out. Hey, I really enjoyed your podcast interview with
Yeah.
Sherry, and
Yeah.
it's just it's very clear that what they're doing is it's probably they're using AI, ChatGPT, to just come up with something like, "Oh, this person listened to my podcast," and they haven't, and they're thinking, "Okay, that's just going to bridge the gap. That's going to make me warm up to them." And you know what? It worked the first time it happened, and then after a while, after that, you realize, okay, this is just a game. My point is that people are just so off their mark with, if they just understood these things. And we do live at a beautiful time. One, we have this understanding, thanks to people like you, and two, we do have the likes of LinkedIn.
Yes.
I had a conversation with a guy yesterday, and we were mutually connected, and it was like, okay, why are we talking? But we did have this connection that we both played college football, both played small college football.
Yeah.
That was 10 minutes of the conversation, and we didn't have a lot of time. It was just kind of a get to know you call,
Mm-hmm.
but it was enough to say, we should talk again.
Yeah.
Let's stay on one another's radars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Whereas if that stuff's not there, it's like, yeah, okay, that was just another. And I have those calls too, where it's like, okay, it was nice to meet you. I'm not really sure, I'm not really sure I'm going to invest any more time in this.
For sure.
Nothing mean, just so.
Yeah.
So, I know this is going to be kind of an oxymoron, but tactically, how do you encourage people to really kind of take advantage of, God, tactically take advantage? Those are two horrible words.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
these are the things you need to do, and do in a genuine way.
Right. So there's two approaches to this that I would recommend. One is that the first principle, which comes from actually Phil M. Jones has a book called Exactly What to Say, which I think covers a lot of this, but I'll pick out one piece. What he talks about is the principle of curiosity. And so in engaging people in conversation, people do things for their own reasons, not for yours. And curiosity is the key to unlocking that. So in engaging people with that principle, if you ask them about what they're thinking about, what they're engaged with, you open the door to understanding what's important to them, what they care about, and that curiosity creates a window into the area that would create commonality. So if you talk about, like, you're at an event or something, like what brought you to this event, or why are you here, or what's a priority for you right now. You're now getting them into a space of conversation that allows you to have some common frame of reference.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. The dovetail to that, which is another area, is that in any place that you're starting a conversation, and this ties into what you mentioned around LinkedIn and the college football component, is that our starting point for any relationship is an in-group, and we'll aim for any way in which we can define an in-group. So as the Margaret Mead story that you began with, like the healed femur or the element is to say, like, this is our group, and that is, for in this example, was like college football. So people will define an in-group however they can, like we grew up in the same area, or we did the same sport, or whatever it can be, and people will stretch as much as they can to find a salient in-group
Yeah.
that they can connect over, because as social creatures we want and strive for connection as much as possible. Now, it has to be an in-group that people resonate around and care about, and if we can really connect on that in-group, then great. But if we don't, and we don't have something to talk about with that in-group, then it sort of peters out and it's not really relevant. But if we can kind of jam on that in-group component, then it lends itself to, oh, this is someone that I have something to share and talk about, and we have some connection around that. So those are the two things. It's curiosity and connection that I would start with.
Yeah, no, I like those. And again, back to LinkedIn, LinkedIn affords us the ability to kind of see components. We don't get the whole story, but we get stops along the way. How did you end up at that college? Right?
Yeah.
Are you, Mike, well, before we hit record, where are you at? Iowa.
Yeah.
Are you from Iowa? No, and there's a story how you got from Minnesota to Iowa. Sounds like it involves Wisconsin.
Yes.
We have those are in groups for us because I went to
Yes.
college in Wisconsin, and well, you lived in Ripon. We played football in Ripon. And those are all little in groups that we try to discover, but not everybody does. I mean, people try to go to that hard sell, like just try to,
and I think that's the key, is exactly what you just said, is that for all of us, we have this flag that is derived from our brain chemicals that tells us, because our risk signal in our brain is always there around, is this a veneer because the person is trying to take advantage of us? So are they using the curiosity or the connection to be able to use that in order to take what they want and not, reciprocate? Because reciprocity is a very important principle. So coming back to the idea of generosity, when we serve others and we're truly offering value to another, that's where curiosity and connection through generosity lowers the barrier to the concern of the brain of, is this someone that I can trust? And by offering that first, by saying, how can I serve you? How can I provide something to you? We create the element for the brain to say, oh, no, this is actually someone that I can trust. I'm not worried, because they've already showed to me that they are not going to take advantage of me. And, we start that off small, and then we establish consistency in that principle. And then the brain realizes, yes, this is someone that I can trust, and I will reciprocate essentially that same level. And then we grow over time. So these are essentially the 3 C's. It's, the curiosity and the connection and the consistency of generosity to be able to establish trust.
To me, this stuff is fascinating. And at some point, love to get you back on. We can really kind of take a deep dive into this, how it relates to not-for-profits.
Oh, sure.
There's just tons of things.
Yeah.
Shifting gears, how can people listening help you? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on all the social media networks and things like that. But what I would say is, what I'd be interested in is if there are people that are listening to us right now and I can be of service to them, let me know. I'd love to connect them to whether it's a resource or a person that would be helpful to them. And I'd love to start out a conversation that way.
I know a couple people who are in the not-for-profit space. I'm going to forward your information on as soon as we're done here. So see where that goes. So
I'd be happy to see if I can be of help to them or if there's someone that I know that could be helpful to them. That'd be great.
Yeah. Sherry, this has been awesome. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on here. It was a great conversation.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.